Okay, we have with us now joining Dr. Shane Mohammed.
Yes. Dr. Mohammed, good afternoon. Thank you so much for rejoining State of Affairs.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Dr. Mohammed, we have a lot to unpack. There are many different areas. There are breaking news, but let's start in Tobago. The last time you were here, Monday, you indicated that you were confident there was going to be a victory, but you were very safe. You did not want to call the numbers, but you were very confident that this was going to be in the TPP's favor. Now we are here, 15-0, TPP 15, PNM 0. What are your thoughts? What what does the PNM need to do to regain trust?
I think I'm not surprised by the result. And what is even more important is that on Monday, when we were talking, I said a voter turnout was going to be very critical. And I was very hopeful that the voter turnout would not have slipped under 50%, which it did not. It was steady around the 50%, 51% turnout. There was only about 100 votes less, even less than 100 votes, if I were to calculate right, maybe 90 something votes less in the overall turnout for the 2026 THA elections as compared to the 2025 general elections. Um, and that also, when broken down right, by the EBC, it showed that there was a 6,000 vote difference between the PNM and the TPP, which also showed that a high level of a high number of persons chose not to vote for the PNM. And when I say high number of persons, I mean uh, not the entire support base of the PNM came out to support the PNM in this election, but a high number of persons did come out to support the TPP. I would say that the TPP's base and more came out to vote for the TPP to ensure that they secured that victory. And I explained that there are several dynamics here. On the one hand, you have a grouping of persons who belong to the PNM that chose not to, dis- to exercise their franchise. Then you have a grouping of persons that are possibly TPP supporters, but they are the ones who felt that, like me, that the TPP, regardless of what, was safe in the outcome of the election. And therefore they said, okay, they're safe, we are not prepared to come out and vote because they are safe, they're inside already. And then somewhere in that mix, there is a grouping of swing voters that will have decided either they are not voting because, one, they are not satisfied, they are not voting because it is possible that they also believe that the TPP was safe and deserved a second chance. But who will be the guardians in the 4 years ahead to decide whether or not there's a shift to or away from um, the ruling party? So those are the small aspects that I took in terms of the numbers, right? What it says for the PNM is that, and I said this on a different station, so I will say to you all today, um, the people who chose not to vote for the PNM, who belong to the PNM, who are traditional PNM supporters, maintain their position that the PNM is very broken. And going into this election, the PNM remained very divided. I mean, there were several attempts, twice, I believe, two attempts by the former Prime Minister to enter into the Tobago discussion, and it was cancelled. And I feel, had he entered into the discussion, the victory may have been swifter, and the results may have been earlier, and it may have been worse in terms of numbers. But it showed that the former prime minister still didn't believe that retirement was on the cards for him. He still wanted to play an active role in the politics, and I think that was dangerous. But additionally, so those persons who contested the THA elections for the PNM is what I call the residual Rowley faction of the PNM that sustained after the general election and in the lead up to Mrs. Beckers Robertson becoming leader and opposition leader. So while sitting in studio with at least with two members of the PNM, there was a sideline discussion that this is not something that they, well, I could safely say they didn't expect. They were hoping for an 11-4 victory in favor of the TPP. So they were still hoping that they would have built upon the one seat that they had by gaining three. And for every one of the three seats that they earmarked, when the result came, it was like a blow to them. So then when the numbers started to get to 10, and then 11, and then 12, and then there was a 13, and it got stuck there for a bit. They were still hopeful that that 13 would have been it. And then in listening to getting information from different persons on my phone, I looked across and I said, we're at now 14. Because obviously I was getting information faster than some of the information was coming through the station. And they were still, thinking, okay, with 14-1, they sustained. And then I looked across and I said, 15. And that is when I think, when that 15 blow hit them, it was when I saw emotions change, body languages change, facial expressions change, because it was a reality check that they were not hoping for, I gather. And in some instances, it was a reality check that some parties were expecting would happen. And somewhere in the discussion, I said, I feel as though in quiet, silent quarters, persons may have whispered good riddance, because I think the whole move and the whole collapse of everything that was representative of the residual Rowley leadership needed to be dispensed with in order for the PM to have a real rebuilding reality check, honest discussion with themselves, in order for them to really and truly chart the way forward as envisioned by the political leader and opposition leader.
Now, a lot of people are saying that Dr. Rowley would have caused the demise of the PNM on both fronts, on the front in Tobago and on the front in Trinidad. Do you believe that all that statement you just made there about the Rowley faction, those residual people remaining, do you believe that all of them has to go in order for the PNM to properly rebuild itself into formidable machine as it once was?
The thing about it is, there were several times, even in the months after, so not only in the run up to this THA election, in the months after the general elections, I think I'm one of the few people who consistently asked the PNM, who is your leader? Because I think observing and understanding and looking on and listening and talking to people, that was a serious issue. And there are many people who said to me, even yesterday, the day before, that they feel as though the opposition leader is very weak and she's not doing what she's ought to do. And I beg to differ. I believe that the opposition leader is very much aware of every single personality, where the divisions are, who is causing the strife. She's fully well aware. And a strategic leader will observe her environment, observe personalities, behaviors, opinions, thoughts, perspectives, even around a table, sitting in an executive, looking on and listening, and pay attention and take note of certain things before she acts. And I also believe the opposition leader is fully well aware that the division in the party continued after the general election, and that part of that division also existed in Tobago. So therefore, I can say to you that one of the things that I'm looking forward to is the reconstruction of and who emerges. Because I'm not about to talk about. I mean, I had a whisper last night that said to me, and last evening, that maybe it should be Calvin Morris. No, it should be whoever is prepared to pick up the mantle with a passion for the party, a passion for Tobago, who is willing to understand why and to be honest with themselves as to why the PNM is where it is. And I said this on a different platform, I'll say it here, that in my observation, not so I in my years, right? I mean, when the 80s, when 1986 occurred, I was a child. I mean, maybe a toddler, right? But taking into consideration the history of 1986 and the years that came after, 2025 is by far the lowest the PNM has been, at least in my years of understanding politics. And to where we are, where the PNM is, for me, is as a result of the cataclysmic failure of leadership of Keith Rowley and his understanding of the institutions and the traditions and the values of the PNM. Because I accept that there needs to be modernization of institutions, but that modernization of institutions must not be leader centric, and it must not be modernization to the point where you alienate traditional practices. There will be a problem when those two things hit each other and collide.
Dr. Raghunath, I have two questions for you. Number one, was it uh, was it a good or bad idea to place former sports minister Shamfor Kudro on the platform? Number two, why was there this type of need that even before the official results came out, that we saw people trying to hold on to the narrative that there was low voter turnout, and this is why the results went into the direction of Farley Chavez or Gusting, without accepting that the PNM needs to do some internal checking, re-evaluating. Why was there this need to push this narrative? And it was all fake news. It was wrong information. It was whether it was distorted intentionally or not. We saw all over social media people were pushing and saying that it was only 23%, and very few of them have corrected what they did not verify the data. So could you say why? Could you answer those two questions, please? Hello?
Dr. Raghunath is here.
No, he was here. Dr. Raghunath was here. Dr. Mohammed, are you hearing us?
I'm hearing you very clearly.
Yes, you could respond.
I'll tell you this. When we looked at the numbers at the very, and we kept saying these are preliminary results that we were getting in studio, we were getting from outside by parties. There at the very early, because I mean, seats were being declared by political parties before the final numbers were getting to you know were in studio. And when I calculated it, so I was looking at, in front of me has my laptop, and in 2021, I was looking at those numbers. So the highest number accrued was like 1,400 votes by Farley. So let's use Farley, for example, as the majority, right? So in 2021, Farley would have gotten 1,494 when he won his seat. But then when we dropped to 2025, they would have collected something around 12, right? Somewhere around 12. So there was a drop of 200. And then when we come down now to 2026, we were hovering around 1,000 to 1,100 votes. So that there was a consistent drop of about 200 votes per election, which showed that maybe, give or take, there was a collective decline of about 500 votes looking on, right? So you're looking at 400, maybe 1,000 votes, 100. But I wanted to, again, playing it safe because you don't know. So I averaged that there was a decline of 500 votes per electoral district. And when I multiplied 500 votes by 15, I got 7,500 votes. 7,500 votes less than 26,000 would have put us around 21,000 votes. And it just did not add up. It just didn't make sense. So I didn't talk about it. I just talked about the possibility of a low voter turnout, because if it had dropped by about 7,000 votes, we would have probably gotten about 22,000, or somewhere around there, 21,000 people voting. And that still isn't as low as those in, somebody put political analysts in inverted commas on social media were projecting a 23 to 28, but it didn't make sense. And I'm saying, and I was using it in the morning, I said somehow they are projecting it to be somewhere between 23 and 28%. But it's still, I was cautious about it because it still was not adding up. Until I was sitting in one of my friend's vehicles and I saw the EBC put out the number. And then when I saw 50.89%, 51%, and the breakdown of 10 to 16,000, and then I looked at the numbers from 2025 and then 2021, it's remained consistent, right? You have to understand that when, again, an opposition party is in power or attains power, there is a concerted effort to peddle a lot of misinformation out there, and a lot of bacchanal, and a lot of and people lap it up. And that's the problem I have with Trinidad and Tobago, that there are elements in the society who are consciously prepared to peddle misinformation and turn that information into something that they believe it to be. So, for example, this is a peeve of mine. And I was observing yesterday on social media comments and that thing, but there's one particular blogger, Marsha Walker, who consistently during the course of yesterday talked about the statement of poll being made public, and the statement of poll is made public. The statement of poll is also within the remit of those people who are sitting inside of the polling stations, calculating those votes. Everybody in the room has the ability to calculate, and to each political party has an agent in there or two that are marking off these votes, and they are showing if you've been into a station where when you're counting, when it is finished counting, everybody holds up the paper for everybody to see, right? Every ballot is open for everyone to see. So if you are in the room, or you have been accustomed to what the process is like when voting counting is taking place, then you will understand that obviously there are preliminary results. Also, take into consideration, there is room for human error because someone missed one ballot because something is happening. So the bottom line is, what we should be talking about is maybe moving towards a more modernized, technological driven way of counting ballots, so that they can be verified by both a human and a machine. But nobody's talking about that. She was busy talking about SOPs being available and made public and that kind of thing. And I was exhausted by the nonsense that is being put out there, and people were laughing about it. And then she was defending it by saying, well, I don't understand How is it that the political parties can get it wrong because they are collected? Yes, but not everything comes in at the same time. I mean, for you had two recounts yesterday, and in those two recounts, Calvin Morris went from losing by 17 to losing by 12. You know, there was also I think a 3 or 4 vote change in Trevor James went from winning by 150 to by winning at 147. That is because human error takes place. There's, in counting, you have to sometimes, if you're not looking or you don't have people there who understands where the X ought to be, and if the X is supposed to be here and it is here and it is touching the line, side the line, it doesn't disqualify, but somebody might be, not ready to challenge it because they might be intimidated by another personality. And those things, human error, is also something that we have to consider in the voting process, in the counting process. So that is something that irked me because, Dr. I want to tell you, we as political scientists and analysts, we get licks from the public because they don't understand processes and procedures and numbers. I will say to you all, at the end of the entire weekend, from Thursday to yesterday, I was so exhausted that I was probably running on 4 hours of sleep from Sunday night into yesterday. So I had, people don't understand that sometimes you get all political science out and you need that moment to recharge and for us to recalibrate and go back. So, I was very exhausted when I came home from Tobago last night because there's so much that had been happening. Information is happening in real time and news is happening in real time, and you still have to prepare yourself in case the phone rings that you are able to answer. So that, I think, is one of the peeves and the challenges that we face, that the level of misinformation, the lack of understanding of processes and procedures, the alignment and the existence of human error and human ability, capacity within the system is something we have to give way to.
Dr. Mohammed, do you believe the electorate now is in Tobago and in Trinidad, because we have been seeing consistently the votes have been declining and declining? Do you believe that the electorate are now getting really fed up of this whole exercise and fed up of our leadership? Because as I discussed yesterday, or said yesterday, there is certainly a crisis of leadership within the PNM, because as it has been touted that the PNM don't seem to know who is their leader. You don't know if it's.
I'll say this. I think it is important for leaders to pay very much attention, all of us, pay serious attention to the voice of the people. The voice of the people, the emotions of the people is very important. And the decline in there are several aspects of why we could just a decline. Why a decline in turnout is happening. There's voter apathy. There is also some people are satisfied with where we are, so they don't feel to vote. There's still the notion that them inside, boy, them safe, so we have to vote for them depending on which political party people support, right? So declining voter turnout has many factors and very many levels by which you have to assess. So people who are satisfied but are supporting but will not vote because they believe the party is inside and safely inside. Those who are totally fed up and who belong to a political party or traditionally supports one party, but they don't believe that that party is up to standard, so they don't wish to vote for another side unless it's compelling. Those who have a voter apathy, that believe that nobody on either side is doing anything and they're just hanging around roses and taking advantage of people's goodwill. I mean, I've had conversations. I mean, sitting in the airport yesterday, persons would have come up to me and, just wanted to engage. And one of the engagement that I would have had was that even persons who voted for the current administration feel a sense of disappointment, and they feel that, collaboration and communication could be improved, should be sustained. And sometimes you just have to listen, because who am I to and who are we, even political actors, who are we to dismiss people's emotions and feelings? I think one of the most important aspects and duties and responsibilities of political actors is to be able to have the capacity to understand the emotions of people and not be quick to dismiss it.